So you're second? That's my stuff. You can just put it down. It's okay. You can come. Got like 8 minutes.
Okay.
Do you want to sit here? I'll introduce you first there, and then
I'll go. You got it. I'll wait for you.
that's my job. Okay.
I'm a boring talker.
Just want to just pull up the cord there. Yeah, just behind you. Just each other's side fun.
From Alpha House,
We're Alpha
the
House.
next the next show. The first one you had up there.
Oh, is that this is the second question?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. They were labeled that way.
No, it's all good.
She's gonna introduce us. Are you gonna sit and talk?
Sorry. No, I'm just making sure we have this because if you're gonna do the first like 1 or 2 slides, you can.
I'm gonna go stand up there.
Oh, okay.
After you're done talking, you should hit my both stand up there. Because there's like, should hit my both stand up there after.
You do whatever you're comfortable with.
That makes sense. If you're going back to great.
Yeah.
They don't have to like sit down.
Yeah. I might wait for a bit because there's a lot before.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we'll get started now as it's 1:30. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to How to Respond with Compassion and Collaboration to the Complexities of Encampments. It's great alliteration, thank you. My name is Daphna Nussbaum. I am the program analyst and coordinator for the Peel Alliance to End Homelessness. For those of you who don't know where Peel is, it comprises of Mississauga and Brampton and Caledon and is just a little west of us, and maybe some of you landed there when you came on the plane, so that's where we are. Yes, welcome all. I am going to sorry, a few housekeeping items here. So I'm not just welcoming people in person, I'm also welcoming the virtual participants, and virtual participants of this session can submit questions during the Q&A at the end. There's a tab below the live stream, which will be, so you can ask questions, those who are participating online. And then we have two presentations today. But before we get started, I'm going to read a land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that the City of Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So, yes, so welcome to our session. Our first presentation, bear with me here, I'm working off two different devices, here we go, is reducing displacement and supporting rough sleepers towards stability. So Charlene Wilson, who's over there, is the Director of Programs and Services for the Calgary Alpha House Society. And there are two, Cody, how do you pronounce it? Snoxel is also with us here, and then Brianna Paco. So welcome, and yeah, the floor is yours.
Awesome.
Hello and welcome. I'm not going to introduce myself as that happened for me, so thank you. So today we're going to be sharing with you some of our learnings and some key roles in reducing displacement for supporting folks that are sleeping rough. So we're going to jump right into it, but I'm going to give you a little background on Alpha House. Oh, I have to do this part too. That's okay, no. So our mission at Alpha House is to support folks in multiple different ways and to provide a safe and caring environment for those individuals that have been impacted by alcohol and other drug dependencies. We were established in 1981, so 40-some years ago, with two programs, just our shelter and detox, supplying resources and safe space for individuals experiencing homelessness and addiction. In the last 40 years, we've expanded our services in both Calgary and in Lethbridge. And in 2005, we created our Downtown Outreach Addictions Partnership, which is well known as the DOPE team. To support street-level social disorder in providing also access to safe sheltering. Since then, we've continued to grow and develop further programs in trying to tackle the same battle all of us are doing. So our encampment team is going to do a presentation for us today. So let's jump into it.
Alpha House is, one second. Alpha House's encampment team is a mobile response program. The main activities of this program include locating, connecting, and providing supports to individuals and couples who sleep rough and are either unconnected to the shelter system or infrequent users. In my experience, usually these people are not staying near where the shelters are, and our job is to bring either of those supports to the clients. And then in other cases, we can bring them down to the supports, usually in the city center, and accompany them through those processes. We also work in partnership with Calgary Bylaw, which we'll get into more detail about. And the overall goal is to reduce displacement and work towards long-term housing solutions. Some program objectives is improving crisis triage. We do this by being a mobile team and meeting where the clients are at. Our teams are available 7 days a week, and there are low barriers to accessing our services. We also, a main objective is to utilize integrated case management through building trust and meaningful relationships with the individuals that we work with that also sleep rough. We provide some non-emergency support by assessing the client's needs, identifying the appropriate resources, and then making that connection with the appropriate support. We try to work with as many other resources as possible so we can provide a diverse set of resources for our clients. We see the other resources when we network with other agencies as tools on our belt, and the more the caseworker knows, the more they can provide to our clients. This is our program participant target. It's pretty much everybody. Adults with no dependents in their care, unaccompanied youth, ages 13 to 24. We do see a high number of couples set up encampments. In my experience, it is sometimes a safety mechanism or some partnerships that are formed along the way. Right now, Calgary does not have any couple shelters at this time, and a lot of our assessments are usually for individuals, but we can still use resources such as the YWCA to connect couples with couples housing programs. The youth shelters in Calgary also tend to fill up quite quickly, but they also have a separate triage system for housing youth that we utilize. Also, a large percentage of our program participants are individuals who identify as Indigenous, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We do bring out Satina Outreach. I know they're here at the conference this week, so you might run into them. But they come out and provide some cultural supports for some of our individuals. A major goal is to have a low barrier access, especially with our referrals. Of course, a client can refer themselves, but we do get a lot of referrals through the community. And this is just simply a phone call or email. If you search the encampment team in Calgary, our information should come up. It's also, like I was saying, there's a proactive approach. It's not necessary for a referral. We do, in some downtime, if we don't have a busy day, we are sweeping the streets and looking for new clients. We'll have a map soon here where you can see where we have everything mapped out, and we can sweep those areas and find new people to connect with. The only formal documentation that we require for participant to reach services is just a consent to communicate. And so the caseworkers can speak on their behalf when connecting them with services. And then when we receive those referrals, we take all the information we can, and then we go out and engage with those individuals and understand what services we need to go gather and then bring to them. Some examples is the Concerned Citizens, Calgary Police Services, Fire Department, EMS, Calgary 211, which is a provincial helpline that it's a non-emergency helpline, and then different partnering agencies. And then Char's going to touch on some data stuff here.
Perfect, thanks, Cody. No, we can snuggle, that's okay. So over the years, and as we go through systems and build programs, we naturally will find tools that will be more helpful. So we found the Geographic Information System, and it is spectacular. The reason that I wanted to highlight this today was because when we're talking about outreach and all of the pieces that we're doing, it's a million hats. We're not stationary, we're kind of moving around all the time trying to figure out what's happening for folks. So this system was really a brilliant way to kind of incorporate what are we doing? We got case management, we got people moving around, how do we track it, high-risk areas, and when folks move, we can also close those locations because we don't have that access unless it's like locked in one person's mind. So this was a super helpful, multi-beneficial program that we just started to kind of open up in the last, I would say, 3 years, and I want to highlight it today. So all of these dots that you can see here, these guys spend so much time being fantastic. The green dots are all the active camps, and the red dots are all the camps that have been closed. So the reason we want to capture both is that people tend to go back to previous locations, but we also have so many systems and partnerships that we want to make sure that we're paying attention to community. So those areas are being cleaned up, debris is being managed, and we can manage it all with just this one system. In the case management piece that they have too, you can do like anecdotal case notes, assessments, what's been done, captured all on one platform. So it's simple to use. It's like does it take you 3 minutes?
Yeah, it's a survey essentially, and it has a
Geo mapping.
component to it.
So I would encourage you guys to look at it because it's super fantastic should you be developing something in the future. This last summer, we had a wicked flood that came through Calgary. I'm sure you guys heard about it back in the day, 2013. I think we had a terrible flood that wiped us out. This year, we are at risk of some flooding again. So myself and Kevin, who will be chatting later, sit on the safety team with the city. So we were able to pull this and see where our folks were. So are they in high-risk areas, pull heat maps. So it's like a multi-beneficial program. You can use it for so many things. And we were able to identify where those folks were and get them out of those dangerous areas. It's my boring piece. I love data. All right, Cody.
All right. So our primary goal is to connect individuals who are sleeping rough to housing and in support of their individual's exit from homelessness. One such way is through community case management. In some cases, clients may find housing on their own. There's also some other options which we will get into later, such as diversion. I'm just going to outline some of our other program activities here. As Char was saying, we try to do a proactive weather response and high-risk behavior minimization. So not setting up in those flood areas, finding safer places to be. We'll also get into minimizing risk of having fires at camps. We provide clients with survival supplies and basic needs. Welfare checks, options of mobile sheltering. If it's cold, we can always go in the van. If they do want to go in shelter, we will take them. With our clients, that's not often the case, but we'll let them heat up in the van, get some warm gear, get some dry clothes on, and then they can visit their camp. We're reducing displacement in collaboration with city partners, Bylaw and CPS. We have that partnership with Bylaw where if, let's say, they want to move along a camp because it's in a children's park. We can connect with those individuals, figure out what's a better option for them, and then revisit where they have moved to. Also, if someone has some housing opportunities lined up, so let's say in the next week, we can advocate on their behalf, like let's keep them in this spot, give me a week or two, and then we're gonna have some intakes and stuff going forward. So providing those long-term solutions for everyone. We provide all the housing intake forms, and then we're also able to advocate for people when we attend those meetings when it comes up. So we do the intake forms, and then the agencies who have those housing spots have a discussion of who's a fit for their agency. We're able to sit on those meetings and advocate for our clients and explain that we have close contact with them and they are a good fit for their programs. Interagency connection, always trying to network, and like I was saying earlier, every other agency that we can use is another tool on our belt. And then we're responding to community concerns. So needle debris is something we'll do. We do have a designated needle team, but we will pick up needles. And just responding to active camps in the communities and providing that public education piece and sharing those resources with the community and concerned citizens. Bree's gonna give you a little tidbit.
Hi, everyone. As mentioned, our teams are mobile response. So with that, we carry supplies with us, either in the van or in these lovely backpacks. A lot of the time, our camps are very secluded, so we have to walk quite a ways to get to our folks. In our backpacks, we'll have acute medical supplies like AED, first aid kit, and then all the basic needs things, so like food, clothing, hygiene supplies, things like that. This is just one example of what maybe like the environment would look like that we're walking into. Again, it's usually quite secluded more often than not. And our folks, as you can see, can get quite creative in the ways that they're trying to, get away from the elements. So when we're talking about case management, what does that look like for us, either in the field or not in the field? So typically that looks like us completing a housing assessment. We also sit on CAEH committee to kind of advocate for our folks. So the first process would be, obviously, like I said, the housing assessment. And then we can support with things like intakes to the supporting agency that's picked up for housing for our individual. We recognize like the proactive capacity for that. So how independent is the individual and what's kind of the needs that we're trying to service for them in the different types of housing. So we do the transports for those types of intakes. We also do treatment and recovery referrals, as well as transport that individual to the treatment facility. We also have a program, I think Cody briefly touched on, called diversion or housing outreach. And it's a separate funding, so they support with folks going out of the system. So you don't have to go through the system for this program. And it's really great because we can really focus on different things like family reconnecting. If folks are, from a different province, then we can do that for them, like connect with the family and just make sure that they have like a secure place elsewhere. So if they're trying to get back to somewhere where there's more support for them, we really want to encourage that. So we just want to like make sure all dots are aligned and that we're not making someone else homeless in a different province. So we really follow a good process with that. And then there's just another huge piece of, I think Shar is going to speak on, of the Calgary Fire Department and a lot of other partner agencies as well that I'll speak on later. But a huge thing is like fire response.
So I keep jumping back and forth. I feel like I should sit on the end. So a couple of years ago, we had a large encampment area that was down along the waterways, and that's something that we see in Calgary. Some of you may have the same experiences. So it's more secluded, there's access to water, but we also see folks that will find natural shelters like under bridges. So this is super dangerous. We have folks that are putting fires directly inside their tent. They're using propane. They're putting themselves between homes and community centers or parks, schools, behind garages in our city center with propane. So we've seen several explosions in the last couple of years, and we've had colder winters. That could be a contributing factor. So we started another project with the Calgary Fire Department to reduce danger and to try to save more lives, being proactive versus reactive, because when there's an explosion, people are often hurt. So I did a couple pictures here for you guys, and this one on the far right was hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage to a city transport bridge, and the fellow received third-degree burns and was in the hospital for a long, long time. So we got together and tried to figure out what is simple. How do we do an approach to fire prevention? So we came up with the simplest tool, and looking back, this is why collaboration is so key. So we do sandbags, a foldable shovel, and a pamphlet, and we're going through those processes. It seems simple enough, but it's not trivial, it's not complex. We're engaging with people every single day. So let's talk about how do you stay warm, and keep your skin, because some of these are incredibly dangerous scenarios, and it's worked very well for us. And this was an additional project on top of our needle debris that the team did touch on. So as we're going through this in our time at Alpha and exploring some of the gaps in the system, we're seeing something this simple has such a dramatic effect and can be super helpful. And now the teams are asking for those, or the individuals are asking our teams, do you have sand? Can I have the water? Do you have a shovel? So they're digging down into the ground. They're not putting them in their tent. So we're trying to find different ways. You know, under a bridge, there's a lot of smoke, so you're breathing that in. So it's those types of tools and that we're still trying to like really hone in on. And our folks are the ones that are the experts. So unfortunately, in these two specific events, this was a reaction. But it had a good outcome, which, not for this fella, but as we build our partnerships more and more, we'll keep trucking along on some of these simplified projects that we can enhance. Thanks, Cody.
And then just to add some other points on how we can help our clients with some safety planning. With the extreme weather changes, we do get a lot of donations. We do rely on the donations and grants from the community and from our funders. So to provide that winter gear, gloves, toques, things like that. We also work on planning for these other extreme weather changes, other things that come with that. Sometimes people are camping and then there's a big snowfall and then you can no longer see that camp because the snow's covered it. So things like that map that we showed earlier, we know to go sweep those areas and make sure no one's, you know, trapped in a tent that's covered in snow and go by everyone's tents. We also help with fire prevention, as Shar just touched on. Overdose prevention as well, so just some, like, we use harm reduction based, and then also things like, you know, don't use, if you're going to use, don't use alone, use with a friend, so just to reduce with overdose, provide our clients with naloxone. Yeah, so just working with the client and figuring out what potential risks that they might have while they're camping, and then trying to be proactive to reduce those amount of risks from actually harming our clients. This is just some additional other services that we provide. So transporting people to legal obligations, and then with these justice supports, we want to be reducing the interactions that they have with the system. So getting somebody something as simple as just a low-income bus pass will reduce their amount of instances with the police and the transit officers, so that they have actual fare. We also can help them seek legal guidance and assistance and provide them transport to any legal obligations, access medical supports. The example here is the COVID-19. We did have a partnering agency where they would come out and provide vaccines for our clients, whoever wanted them, and then follow up the 2 weeks later and provide the additional doses if needed. Also, we'll provide COVID testing. Also, we do have mental health professionals on site if needed. For us, that is just putting in a referral. The urgent mental health nurse will get back to us usually in a week or two, and then she'll come out and do an assessment with our client, and then from there it's ongoing. If we need to take them in for appointments to see somebody, medication, whatever it is, we assist them going forward. Again, that nurse does attend the sites with us. It's been a great resource for us. Here's a picture of somebody. I think they're getting a COVID swab to see for their testing. So this is one of the nurses from the partnering agency. How this worked is we knew where everybody was camping. They had the testing strips and the vaccines at the time. So we were able to have a great collaboration with this team here. Do you want to add on the COVID?
Yeah, you know what? I will add on COVID. I feel like we're probably COVIDed out. I think COVID was a large learning experience for every single one of us in this room. We developed more partnerships during COVID than ever before. And I think that was probably with Zoom, and I was chatting a little bit about this earlier, technology. A lot of folks closed their doors and went indoors, but their brains, I swear, got more creative. So it was really cool. We didn't close our doors. We kept going, but we still needed to reach out. I guess it would have been the highest time of the highest COVID numbers. A lot of our individuals didn't even want to come to stationary settings. They didn't want to go to a clinic. They didn't want to come into the shelter. They didn't want resources from us. They wanted us to not be in their camp because everybody was scared. So having people take a moment to say, like, how can I help? What does that look like? More outreach supports literally came out of just natural work that we're doing. People jumping in a car, grabbing swabs. We had people that we didn't have the information on testing strips. They can come out. We talked about isolation. How do we get you somewhere? Can we get you in a hotel? Like, what does that look like? Hotels are more open to taking those on. And this was one example. And I think we did roughly about 200 individuals over the course of 4 separate clinics, got their vaccines and didn't have to go to a stationary setting. So it was more collaboration and amazing outcomes. And there was a lot of chocolate. We had some chocolate involved as well. And we did transport folks, but it gave us another opportunity too to engage with people that typically wouldn't engage with us. Like, we would pop in and they'd tell us to kick rocks and you moved along. But when there was a vaccine opportunity, we used that opportunity too. Let's use that. They're coming to us. Let's talk about things. What's happening for you? So it was a really great project, and we were seeing more and more and more of those pieces coming out of COVID, which is bittersweet almost. All right. I'll let them finish off. I keep jumping up here. There you go.
So like Shar said, a lot of folks during COVID obviously went inside. And then I personally saw an increase of camps just due to COVID circumstances, job loss. So a lot more people were rough sleeping. And with that, once things started kind of opening up a bit more, people coming out of their homes and back out into the community, obviously they're seeing now a lot more camps in their areas, things like that. So we really wanted to engage with the community, and that's a huge part of what we do day to day. As it says here, community engagement, public education, reduce and displacement. So our big focus is to reduce displacement, and that starts in the community. So each person, like, what are you seeing in your neighborhood, and what can we do to address that? These are some examples of what we go into at camps. So for, your average folk coming out to their natural park area wanting to take their dog for a walk, this can be a bit disturbing. So we really try and educate and let people know, like, what our purpose is, what we're doing, the resources that we're providing, and what that looks like, and to maybe try and reduce this amount of debris and garbage in the neighborhood. But also really focusing on the individual that's living there so that they understand that there is a process. It might not be perfect, but we are working towards a common goal. And then Cody's going to speak more about that community engagement, what that looks like.
So when we get calls from a local business or a concerned citizen about something on that last slide in their community, and we attend, we also check in with those business owners and then get more information. We don't just stop at taking the call. We want to see them information and the trends, so how we can shape our response. And that allows us to do extra sweeps in those areas, provide more of a presence, and then also get to know what we can do to help these individuals. Since we do have that partnership with Bylaw, we can provide them with some feedback and how we can reduce that negative attention, why people are calling 311 for bylaw services to come, and then also assist with some cleanup if need be. We also will attend some community association meetings to just get a better perspective on what the community is feeling. We do door-to-door knocking, and then we have these who to call information sheets, when to call dope team, when to call encampment team. When you have needles behind your business, we have the needle response team. We also then provide them with some just overall information on vulnerable people, and explain other resources that not are just internal, other resources that the community can reach out to. This matters because it opens a dialogue for building a community of understanding. A lot of people might not understand kind of where our clients are coming from, or people in our sector. So providing with some of that information tends to be helpful, and they also see that we're there to and actually making an effort as a response. And then also we do rely on donations for program surprise, so these community relations are beneficial for us as well. And then building partnerships with the other agencies that we work with just bridges those gaps, so we can have a full net of response when engaging with our clients. For the client, if we're working with other agencies and the community, this will reduce duplication of services if everyone's on the same page. I don't have an ID referral out there, and so does the mustard seed, and we're all sending these things at the same time. If we can collaborate, we understand who's doing what part. And it does also take some of the caseload off ourselves, and everyone can help and do their part with helping this individual. Our bylaw partnership, Bree will talk in more detail next, but it is very beneficial as we have very open lines of communication with them, understanding what their move is as far as cleaning up camps, giving notices, and we provide them with the feedback. Are these people engaged, and where they're at in the housing process as well? So it just gives us that opportunity to advocate for our clients, which is very important. Local business check-ins, as I said, it's good to see check in after going to the call and explain to them exactly what we do and what we can do going forward. And then explaining the community has access to resources through 211 and 311. So using 211, for example, will triage their call to the appropriate resource. Oftentimes it is one of our teams. This also, through education, breaks down stigma towards our clients, gives the community a better understanding. They can even educate themselves outside of our conversations, and just breaks down that overall stigma around our clients. And it reduces the involvement with the justice system, going back to with that bylaw piece, having those partnerships. We also have a partnership with transit. A lot of our clients can't afford bus fare, and they understand that. So usually they won't get a ticket. I'm not saying never, but usually the officers understand that people are trying to get to their appointments and better themselves and try to get housing. So these partnerships are very important for both the community and the client. Bree's going to touch on the Encampment PAL team, our partnership with Bylaw. Oh. This wasn't on my slide, but that's okay. This is kind of what our back office looks like. So on the left there, we have Chris and Kristen. They have it's called Parachute for Pets. It's it's a care package for pets. It has food, a dog bowl. There's some for dogs, some for cats. So there's some of the donations we got, and we give it out at camps. This is all our encampment stuff. So we got our sleeping bags, hygiene stuff. And then in the back, we got all our food there. And then, this is our tents and sleeping bags that we order in monthly to give out to people to keep warm and safe out of the elements. And Bree's going to talk about our partnership with Bylaw.
So when I was introduced as Encampment PAL outreach worker. So I've had the opportunity and the pleasure to work on this lovely team since the beginning that it launched. Alpha House put out the program and expanded it for this particular partnership in June of 2021. And what that partnership looks like is a city bylaw peace officer matched with an encampment outreach worker, or I believe it says social worker. That will do. So what that looks like is we've seen a huge success in displacement of folks, because a lot of folks in the community go through 311 to have that uniform response. And folks in the community love to see that. But then they also, people have hearts and they care and they don't want to move people. And it's nice that we have the joint coming together and we're there at the same location, real-time response. Bylaw still has that enforcement piece. And for the public, if people are camped out beside a children's park, maybe not, the best place to be. So there is times that they do have to be moved along. But I get the opportunity to really advocate for our folks. If they have like a housing appointment or maybe an intake of some sorts, or I'm really working with ID, things like that, then I can really advocate and say, hey, like, yeah, maybe not the best place to be, but in 3 days, they may not even be here anyways because I'm going to get them into a house. And the public and the community get to say, hey, uniform presence arrived. They're actually really, collaboratively working with Alpha House. This is the process it's going to take. It's only going to be 3 days, give a timeline, 7 days, and people really respond well to that, which is really great. What else can I say about this? So typically before COVID, most people calling into 311 or not even calling into 311, folks were just being displaced all over the place, left, right, and center. They'd go get a ticket even, get moved place to place, and it made it really hard for our teams to connect with people. So if we're working towards goals and you go to a camp and you go the next day and they're not there, well, most folks don't have a phone to tell you, hey, I moved like 5 blocks down. So it makes it really hard for us to continue to connect. And then COVID hit, and the city put in this great thing of shelter in place. And that really showed us and the city that if people can stay in a place for a short-term amount of time while they're working on long-term goals, it really has a positive effect. So then they continued that after COVID happened, especially in cold weather response. So obviously when temperatures get really freezing, people are sheltered in place, they're not being moved all over, but they really showed, hey, like so-and-so over here is able to get into a house and have succession done in 7 days. Well, we got 50 complaints coming in from people. Sorry, they're going to stay there for the next 7 days. So that partnership is really great. Bylaw is very receptive to it, and the city has been really wonderful in collaborating. You know what I'm trying to say.
Maybe just one point to add to what Brianna was saying. We're talking about receiving referrals. This also allows us to access all of the 311 referrals for encampment in the city. So we're not just relying on concerned citizens that just want to call us. It's people that want to call us or also call bylaw. So it does open up how many calls we're getting. So that's another benefit. Talk on the overall goal. I think this is our last slide.
I just wanted to highlight that our ultimate goal for I'm sure many of us in this room is the ultimate goal is safety. So how are we being safe? How are we, supporting what that looks like? Safety, well-being, and security is what we're trying to do ultimately, and whatever that looks like, we're gonna do backflips and dances and all of those pieces. Community collaboration is how we get here. So we won't get here if we don't keep collaborating, if we don't keep talking, and we don't keep trying something new, drop it if it doesn't work, pick it up again. So I think that is something that I just really wanted to hit home. Trying the GIS system is a good way to get there as well. So opening up our minds is how we're gonna get through some of these pieces. So thank you guys so much for your time today. Oh.
Yeah.
You just don't have to get up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Thank you all, Cody and Bree and Charlene. Like that was an amazing presentation, and I learned so much. We have encampments in Peel, so I think, and we have someone from our street outreach in Peel here, Shelley, and I'm sure we'll be taking a lot of this and discussing it between us as because we have encampments. Our encampment community is growing, so really, really informative presentation. Thank you. The next presenter I have is Kevin Webb from the Calgary Drop-In Centre, who will be presenting on a person-centered collaborative approach to encampment response. So welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, Alpha House. It was great. I need to just touch on that work that Alpha House does. We collaborate with Alpha House quite a bit, and I think it really shows the importance of when you set up an outreach team, having it an impactful outreach team that collects data, that looks at what they're doing to grow, and not just throwing things at people to keep them in place, but actually supporting them through the whole process. I'm going to talk today about a person-centered collaborative approach to encampment response. We know encampments have grown over the last couple of years across Canada. We've got hit with this perfect storm of COVID, loss of jobs, toxic drug supply. All of this has created the encampments that have popped up over the past few years. And unfortunately, sometimes encampments have to be closed. This happened in Calgary, but I wanted to talk about who we are. The Calgary Drop-In Center is a low-barrier housing-focused shelter in Calgary. We work right alongside Alpha House. This is our facility. It's 90,000 square feet. We have capacity for about 1,000 people a night in the one facility. We offer housing supports. We have nurse-led health clinics. We own 3 mixed-market residential buildings and are just walking into the whole world of scattered site housing. Our entire programs, we're a data-driven agency, so everything we do is based in data. And we just try to support the individuals to exit homelessness as fast as possible. So what happened? This is out front the Calgary Drop-In Center. It's a really unique setup where we have, you can see in the top here, where the yellow is, this is what we call Dermot Baldwin Way. So we have a parking lot and our facility. There's nothing else around us. And in the summer of 2021, we started to see an encampment starting to pop up. And we were very much of the belief at that point of the shelter in place and let's support people on the street. So we went out and we sourced some funding to start an outreach program. Again, we're a shelter. We do that work really, really well. We did not do outreach really, really well. Dope Team does that really well. But we started the outreach program, and it was really an impactful program where we wanted to, the 2 main things were to take a person from an encampment into housing or divert them from an encampment into shelter. That's all we did. We weren't giving out, we gave out harm reduction supplies and the odd medical thing, but our focus was on those 2 pieces. But the encampment continued to grow. It grew and grew and grew, and we had about, not in comparison to, I know some of the encampments that people have in their cities, but on one congested street, it was about 50 to 60 tents on any given time. We had 30 to 40 individuals. Our outreach team started doing by name lists to see who was out there. And using our data, what was incredibly interesting that we started to see was that people were actually going out there during the day and coming back into shelter at night. And what we realized was that throughout COVID, we all closed our drop-in areas. So we could still maintain community, but a lot of other people couldn't. So their community became encampments where our drop-in centers had closed. And it was going okay. Then we had a gang move in. And I think that probably most people here that work with encampments can say that they've dealt with this. It is an incredibly scary, scary situation. We started to see the number of drug poisonings in our buildings skyrocket. We started to see the amount of violence in our building skyrocket. We started to see the amount of violence on the street skyrocket. We knew that there had to be something done in regards to the encampment. Outreach was starting to hear things like, I'm not allowed to come into shelter. There was some conversations around sex trafficking of minors out there. It was not a safe place. It wasn't safe for our staff to walk to the parking lot. So we worked in collaboration with the Calgary Police Service on what they called Operation Eastside. Collaboration in this whole thing was incredibly important. We needed to look at what were the safety concerns, what were the barriers to access for those in need, and the impact on community. We all hear the community groups when it comes to encampments. And what was really interesting was when we had the outreach team out there, and probably you guys could talk to it too, is we started hearing some of the individuals that were just using the encampment saying that they were not feeling safe. So in collaboration with the city police, we worked on Operation Eastside, which was really to look at the gang that was in the community And we were really incredibly fortunate to have a great group of CPS officers. I need to back up here a little bit. Prior to starting Operation Eastside, one of the things that the district commander for CPS asked me was, what do you guys need? And this was before we really knew a lot about the gang involvement. But I said, what we truly need is one of those old school beat cops. Someone that's gonna come into the encampment, walk around, not an enforcement piece, but start to build those relationships, right? Luckily, we were able to get 2 officers to come in and do that work. Christian is still down there doing it. And it's incredible to see that relationship piece. And I'm gonna show you guys some pictures that will give you tingles. We came together as a larger group after we realized that the encampment was so incredibly unsafe, and realized, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we gonna close the encampment, but support the people that need it, right? So collaboration was 100% key. I worked with Org Code and Ian DeJong. Some of you may have been in his presentation yesterday about the encampment work. Ian and I worked together on that to, look at how we could do this together, right? So this is actually like Ian's work in action now. We came together and pulled a team together of the city, police services, and basically all emergency services, and started to plan prior to. Because this is a very unique situation with the whole police investigation going on, that we couldn't at that time pull in Alpha House and these other partnering agencies. But as a group, we came together and identified that if we were gonna do this successfully, the number one thing that all the groups had to agree on was that it was a client-centered approach. There was absolutely no other way to do this. So we pulled together 3 different tiers of organization. We had the social supports, which was the drop-in center, and then we looped in Alpha House like a day or so before. And then we had a communication plan. If you're going down this road, if this is something that your community has to do, I can't stress the communication plan enough. We got out in front of the communication plan. We had a shared line of what we were gonna say. On the day, it was only Calgary Police Services that was doing communications, but getting out in front and explaining why we were doing it. That we had to do this because of safety. We had to do this to support the individuals that were there. We actually avoided a lot of negative media or negative social media in regards to it. And then operations. So the road closures, the hazardous goods, the enforcement piece. We had these 3 buckets, and we all came together and said, okay, we're gonna now look at this and break it up and come together and figure out what each of us need, and then come back as a larger group. What we had, and I think that this is an incredibly important part to this, is we identified our leaders. We identified that from social supports, it was the drop-in center. From the operations piece, it was Calgary Police. From communications, it was Calgary Police. But then we had the city's buy-in to do this, and the city actually gave us 2 project managers to pull this entire project together. So that's that collaboration, where we had the city, we had the uniform officers, we had social supports, but all with that agreement that it was about supporting the individuals that were there, not about enforcement of removing the encampment. So we knew that we needed a broad-based approach. The number one thing was we had to remove the structures. You guys talked about it great with the fire hazards and that type of thing. We had a lady that was in the encampment that had a fire in her tent, grabbed a bottle that she thought was water, and it was actually gas, and threw it on and lit herself on fire. We had children. We had Georgina, an amazing 83-year-old Hungarian lady that came to the DI after losing her housing and was told she wasn't allowed to come in and was in a tent. Georgina is now housed in one of our apartments, and she's the sweetest lady in the whole world. But we also wanted to know, how do we coordinate this plan to ensure it doesn't return? which I'm going to touch on. And then we needed to support the individuals. With the leading from a person's first approach, as the social agency and the ones that were leading the entire operation, one of the things that I mentioned in one of the meetings was, okay, if we're going to do this, the officers that are going to be there, the EMS that's going to be there, the city officials that are working with us, I want an hour of their time to go over what trauma-informed care is, what harm reduction is, what housing first is, how we're going to do this. Like, equip the officers and those people with those resources so that when they come that day, they understand. This is what Operation Eastside looked like. So we started planning January 28th. Shar, don't get pissed at me when you see this timeline and I only told you like the day before. So we started February 1st. February 3rd, we started having the meetings. On February 28th, Calgary Police Services held a closed-door media meeting with the media to show them what they were seeing. We were showing the videos, the police videos of the encampment. We all work in that world. We also see the results of it. It's the first time that I got to see the actual incidents happening. I wish I could have shown them, but they're going through the courts right now, so CPS wouldn't let me show the videos. But a high level, I saw guys getting hit with hatchets in the head, saw a gentleman being stabbed. The gentleman being stabbed, he was stabbed because he didn't buy from the right dealer. This gang wasn't attacking the other dealers, they were attacking the users. So Calgary Police held the closed-door media press conference, and then we briefed our mayor and city council. A couple weeks prior to all this, we started to have conversations about the encampment in the East Village, and our mayor came out and said, absolutely no, we will not displace people. City council saw the police videos and backed us 100%. The mayor came out recently with her first year as being a mayor and some of the things that she regretted, and she actually talked about how she responded to the encampment in the East Village. On February 9th, this is where that collaboration piece was so incredibly important. By working with our CPS officers, they actually concluded, they basically set the timeline that we were going to do. They concluded their investigation, made the arrests that were required, and then we did the closure the next day. So we had already moved out the not so great people. And then on the February 10th, we came in and started to look at how we were going to go over the process I'm going to tell you. But we didn't stop there, okay? After that, we looked at, the next day we did debriefs and lesson learned to see where we could grow, what we could do differently. And then we continued ongoing supports for those that were displaced to other areas in the city to see what we can do for them for housing. So that's all great. What you guys care about is the social supports and how we did that stuff. So we wanted to kind of do this a little differently. So as a housing-focused shelter, we're great at housing. We need partners to do the other work, right? So we created, again, we're fortunate because of our structure, but we had an open area and we created a resource hub. So the day of the encampment closure, our outreach team and the DOPE outreach team went out and engaged with clients. And we just said, listen guys, we couldn't give you notice. You guys all know why. We don't have to bullshit you here. But what we've done is we've set up this resource hub for you. The resource hub had health supports, housing supports, social supports. We had snacks, everything. And what we would do is we would take the individuals that were in the encampment, have the conversation with them, not close the encampment right away. Say, listen, just pause for a sec. Come to the resource hub. How do we support you, right? And then we supported them through whatever they needed. And then the individual could go back out onto the street and start packing up their belongings, right? It was when we were on the street that day. This was just to show you how quick it actually worked and some pictures of the day. You can see up in these pictures, the Calgary Police Service is just doing the road closure. They're not actually involved in the first part of the morning. As we were doing this, our teams would work with the individuals on packing up their belongings. We knew storage was going to be an issue. So we threw our rules out the window. Every individual that needed to come into the building, we gave 2 totes to. We zip tied them. We did a locker contract with, or a storage contract with them, so we knew how to get in touch with them again. And we brought people in. But we would go through and work with the individual on their individual encampment. And then when they were at a point that they were like, okay, I've got everything I need, then myself or one of the other people would wave to the fire department and have the fire department come in at that moment and do that individual cleanup. So we're not doing this mass sweep of entire area. And then the fire department would come and do a cleanup, and then the city would come in and do the garbage removal. So it wasn't in a giant sweep. It was done in a bunch of stages. So you can see we started at 7:30. I can sit and talk in front of this room, and I've done this a lot, but I actually had to go to the police roundup meeting and talk to a whole bunch of police officers, and it was horrendous. And then we briefed our staff. One thing with staffing that we realized through this, again, ours was a little different because we couldn't give people the heads up that it was happening. We knew that the resource day was happening, but I wanted to be really respectful of staff's own personal beliefs around encampments. So in the meeting, we had a conversation and said, like, listen, this is what's happening today. It's up to you guys. You don't have to be here. You don't have to be part of this, right? Like, I understand you may have different feelings on this. No one left. There was one of my staff who I absolutely love, but she isn't the biggest fan of police. And at the end, Emily's now working very closely with them, and it's been great. So, but giving the staff that out, right? Letting them make that decision if this is something they want to be part of. So we started it at 8:30. By 4 p.m., we were actually completely done. It went a lot smoother than we thought, and this is that collaboration piece again, is that the city knew, Calgary Police knew, Calgary Fire knew, that it was the individuals on the street that were pushing the timeline. It was not them pushing the timeline. So if they had to be there till 8 o'clock at night, they were gonna be there till 8 o'clock at night. Alpha House was down on the street with us. Such an incredible partner for that day and ongoing for the Dermot Baldwin Way. As I said, we were just getting our feet wet in outreach, but we brought in the pros that actually knew the people better, right? A lot of the individuals were coming into our shelter, a lot weren't, but we wanted to make sure that people had a touch point with someone that they felt comfortable with. Was it successful? Kinda. What was really successful about the whole day was the fact that our resource hub, we were able to do 101 services for 35 clients in that day. We had individuals that had stitches that hadn't been removed for 3-4 months. Alpha House was able to transport individuals that we diverted to other appropriate shelters. As well as, we worked really closely, again, that collaboration piece, but we pre-arranged a number of things to make this part of the day successful. With bylaw services, we already had in place, like because we were out there and we had by name lists, I knew that there was one dog, right? So I had pre-arranged with bylaw services that Gizmo could go to the shelter if required. We had already pre-arranged that the shelter, it was okay for Gizmo's father to go walk him once a day, and that Gizmo was gonna get a vet checkup and a grooming, so that when we had those conversations with the individual, he was feeling a little bit more comfortable. We had already had conversations, because we framed it around the resource day, we'd already had conversations with some landlords we worked with that we could rapidly rehouse people. And then we did other things like get more people ID. And then in the long run, overall the entire situation of the day, that day we were able to house 2 people. We relocated 2 people to other provinces that had supports for them. We had another individual go on a viewing. All but 8 people came into shelter. The ones that didn't actually moved on to other areas of the city, and DOPE team followed up with them. Our outreach team that we still had at the time followed up with them. On the day of, and then obviously the next few days, we wanted to continue that housing work, right? Because day of is great, but we know everyone is in crisis and it's about the next day. So the follow through on it ended up we had 24 of the 35 people housed within 2 weeks. I know the big question, I only had 2 of them return to shelter. They're still in housing today and doing great. I tried to house the duck, but he ran away. But this is what we were dealing with in the end. So ended up that we had this is on like 35, 40 tents, right? We had 4,000 pounds of garbage. 150 needles, 373 different vials, 37 propane tanks, 23 drug that word. 21 assorted weapons that were all turned over to CPS, 11 containers of camping fuel, 10 mixed containers of assorted liquids, and 5 aerosol containers. That's on one street. That's probably half the length of a city block here in Toronto. One of the things that I think is one of the biggest highlights for me of the day is that collaboration piece resulted in not a single person being arrested or ticketed the entire day. This is what we were done with. Since then, and in the past few weeks, there's been some tents popping back up on Dermot Baldwin Way. I talked about how we wanted to plan to continue. What could we do to continue to monitor this? The DI itself has started to go out and interact with people more, trying to figure out what the reasons are. DOPE team, we partnered really closely with them to be there more at night. And then about 2-3 weeks ago, you guys were there, we started to see, we came in one morning and there was about 10 tents. And we're like, okay, what do we do? How are we gonna handle this, right? And we thought, well, what we did before worked. So we just spun up in a matter of a day, another one of these mini resource days and support days. So I think the importance for that comment is that it doesn't matter the size of the encampment. It doesn't matter who's in the encampment, that if we lead it from a client-centered approach and with that collaboration of everyone involved, we can jump back in and support people before it gets too big and that gang activity starts to come back in. I can literally watch who's on Dermot Baldwin Way and prejudge how many drug overdoses we're gonna have in our building based on the gang activity out there. So by continuing to monitor it, we're able to keep the individuals that are out there safer. We're able to keep our staff safer. We're able to keep the PTSD and trauma down from responding to drug poisonings. And then we get to build and develop the collaborations that have come out of this that have been absolutely incredible. After the lessons learned, we pulled together what the major strengths of the operation was. And the biggest one was that it was leading with a person-centered social services approach. I can tell you there was some officers that were like not okay with me telling them what to do. I have a manager of housing, and Kate's probably 5'1", and at one point I look over and she's got shopping carts and all of these like containers to bring this client's belongings into the DI, and following her are 4 police officers and the police photographer carrying stuff, right? the coordination of internal and external partners. Having that agreement at the start on how it was gonna happen, that we were gonna lead from the social service standpoint, not from anybody else. And then one of the other biggest strengths was that consistent communication throughout, right? Get out in front of the social media people. It's gonna come afterwards. You know, like my name was thrown out there afterwards. But they couldn't argue what we did because CPS had come out with their press statements and said, look, this is how dangerous it is. This is what's going on, right? So we were able to manage that. And you can see the partnerships with the Calgary Police Service as well. That's our beat cop, Christian. He hates when I call him a beat cop, so I do it every time I see him. Lessons learned. We would have liked to engage partners earlier. You know, if we were to do this, and we've talked about how do we do this with other encampments in the city, and we would have liked to engage partners earlier. We couldn't because of the criminal element. Responding to on-site media presence, we just didn't have one person. We had a phone number we could give them. And then sustaining that long-term safety on Dermot Baldwin Way was incredibly important. This picture, when it was sent to me, just gives me goosebumps and absolutely sums up how the entire day went. But if you look at the top photo, that's a police officer helping somebody pack their bag. So, do I have time for these two things? Okay. I talked about Gizmo. There's Gizmo. You guys remember Gizmo. Gizmo and his parents had been out on Dermot Baldwin Way for a while. Didn't want to come into shelter, right? And it was more around their belongings, and it was around Gizmo. Because we knew Gizmo was out there, because we did that pre-leg work and finding out what was in the encampment, we had that set up. When we talked to him and said, like, hey, listen, like, Gizmo's gonna get a vet check, Gizmo's gonna get groomed, and we've got it set up that twice a day you can go see Gizmo. He was all good with it. He was housed the next day. That photo, I put it up there. This was such a collaboration story that it just blows my mind every time I get to talk about it. But there was one individual that was not leaving the encampment. Like, not happening, not going, forget it. Social services, we worked with them. We had cultural appropriate services try to work with them. Dope team worked with them. Then Christian Thorpe, our beat cop, had a conversation with them. Christian got him housed. Not only housed, Christian reached out to Dope Team to say, I've just called a transitional housing program in Abbotsford and got this individual in there. Can you guys help me? So Dope Team said, yeah, no problem. We'll pay for a bus ticket, right? We get him to the bus, and he's banned from the buses. So we had some funding. So Christian reached out to us, and we were able to get him a flight from Calgary to Abbotsford. But he was incredibly nervous. He had never flown. He had never traveled. It was this whole new thing to him, plus struggling with an addiction, right? And Christian called the Calgary Airport Authority, made arrangements for our outreach teams to take this individual through security with all his belongings and sit with him at the airport until the plane took off. And it just showed that as we started to do this collaboration work, for one individual, we had multiple agencies. We had the Calgary Police Service. Something broke down along that path, but we never stopped. right? There's picture after picture after picture from the Calgary Police Service when they sent me all their photos of officers working with people, right? It started out where they were on the side and then it kind of slowly went through and they were like directing people to the places. It's because we all agreed at the beginning that it was led from a client-centered approach. I know that there's going to be, these are going to be shared. So we wanted to put in there and show you guys the difference of how media responds when you lead it from this type of perspective. We had nothing but positive media response to it. And it's been gone through from there. We've actually been fortunate enough to talk about it at the provincial task force in Alberta. And it's been absolutely phenomenal to see. Thank you.
Oh my God, that was really good. Thank you. Thank you. Can we give a hand to all the presenters just one more time, please? Okay, so we're at the Q&A portion of our session. I am going to read one that was submitted online, and then we'll go to everybody here. So Veronique Lapalme, this is a question for Alpha House. Yep. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very interesting. I have a question for the first group that presented. What is done with the data coming from GIS? Is it shared? Are there any ethical issues? And do they have to speak into the microphone for this to go through?
Yeah, if the presenters can speak with the microphone.
Okay, are they on?
You can use that.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay, great.
Hello? Okay. Yes, the nice thing about this system, and I didn't want to bore everybody, but you can literally pull whatever you want out of the system. So we share the data, but it doesn't share any identifying information for the individual. So if you our CPS collaboration right now, we can enter the information in, but it's a neutral data share. So we're not actually sharing anybody's personal information, unless, of course, they give consent.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the audience? Okay, you back there? And sorry, again, can he just, should he come up here or?
Well, yeah, if the presenter can repeat the question, then that's perfect.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, so we've seen what kind of collaborative measures are put in place when there's an eventual displacement of the encampment that's going to happen. But what about any kind of processes with the city that are working when the idea is to make sure that the encampment stays safe for as long as possible?
So any kind of processes with the city to make sure that the encampment stays as safe as possible?
Sure.
Who wants to? Yep. You want to? Okay.
Well, I was saying the shelter.
I think one of the things is that work that we did, and Shar talked on it earlier, was that the city's continued to keep a safety committee together to help with different situations when it comes to homelessness. So we had a potential flood this summer, and we came together as a group. I think that the natural collaboration pieces that came out of this work has helped with the ongoing supports within the encampments, but I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think that's something that we're constantly looking at too. How do we better our processes? And how do we make sure that we're in front of things? So with this new committee, hopefully we'll have, maybe next year we'll come back and we'll talk about that exact thing. But processes, there's a lot of red tape. I just want to be frank, I guess, at the end of the day, like our processes are individual to the services that we provide. And the city is pretty open to managing those pieces, but we're not quite there because we just started last year.
And just, yeah, on that too, like you take the City of Calgary, the City of Calgary doesn't even have a homeless like committee within the advisory committee in the city. It's something that we're working on. So I think that is just going to continue to grow.
Thanks for that. Okay, I have 2 online questions, but I will do one more in the room. Yeah.
Kevin, for you said that they had a closed door media session with the pictures and so forth. Where did the police get that? Were they doing raids and taking pictures, or how were they getting that to be able to bring back to the council to say, like, this is how serious it is?
Okay, so the question was, where did CPS get the pictures and all of that? They had conducted Operation Eastside, so a massive police investigation. How they got those things, I don't know if I can say. But it was a police investigation around the crime in East Village.
Okay, I'm going to read an online question. This is for Kevin. How do you manage accessibility needs like vision loss, mobility devices, developmental or intellectual disabilities? Is there a medical support component or occupational therapy?
So we're a low barrier shelter, so we'll take and work with anyone. Our shelter itself, much like Alpha House, has healthcare services at it. So we have a nurse-led clinic. But I mean, it's a tough one, but we're gonna bring everybody that's in an encampment into shelter, no matter the supports, and then find the supports once they're there.
Yes, sorry.
The really basic questions, but where do you get your funding from? Like, how are you funded as an outreach team? And the second question is on the GIS tool that you're using. What is the tool that you're actually using? What's the name of it? And then third, again, logistical questions, like how do you coordinate with other outreach teams? I'm sure you're not the only one going out there.
Yeah, those are all great questions. So I'll answer funding first. So who funds us? So that can change, as many of us know, every 12 months, 3 months, whatever that looks like. So currently, we're getting CSIP funding with CPS and the City of Calgary. So they've collaborated, creating a community of safety information framework, I believe is the acronym. So a lot of these projects, as I had mentioned earlier, a lot of stuff came out of COVID, and this is a piece of it. So currently we're funded through the city and CPS. Second question, GIS platform. So it's Survey 123, so that's kind of, it's ARC, GIS. I'm trying to think of all these acronyms, too many. How do we use that to, sorry, I have to repeat your question.
How do you coordinate with other outreach teams?
So this platform is only being used by us at this point. That may not be completely true. I don't know who's all using it. We coordinate because we have collaborative outreach opportunities almost weekly. So we coordinate, we have schedules. The Coordinated Access and Assessment Team through CHF also meet twice a week. There's lots of different opportunities constantly to engage, or we just pick up a phone and ask. In terms of the GIS piece, it's not applicable. It's just specific to Alpha House at this point, but other people could be using it. Third question was? Okay, perfect.
Thanks for covering all of those. I'm going to read one from online. Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Resource Hub? Did it also provide shelter beds? Was it open 24/7? How long did it stay open after the day?
Okay, so the Resource Hub actually was only open for that day. It was an extension of the DI's housing focused shelter model. So every person that came in could directly go from the resource center into our shelter so that there was shelter beds. And then, yeah, we didn't continue it. And the reason for that is that we see that all of those services are part of the philosophy around a housing focused shelter. So that's what we want our shelter to be, is a continued resource hub. This was literally spun up for the day of. One of the things though that we have continued to do within the shelter is mini resource days now. So every month we have a day where we take a floor and we have all of those resources there that people can come to, and then continue on, but we're looking how we can expand that to be more an ongoing thing on the first floor of our building.
Awesome, thank you. Are there any questions? Yeah?
I actually live in Vancouver now, but I spent time in the drop-in center and Alpha House, although sometimes I get to Alpha House and it was all full and, and I actually got banned at one point from the drop-in center. And then I ended up going back in and they're sort of like, well, where else is she gonna go? So I wanna thank you for having the drop-in center in Alpha House, but I also wanna know, like, are you including lived experience voices in the work that you're doing?
Yeah.
Switch for Alpha?
Yeah, I can. Sorry, I can't see you. There you are. Absolutely. I think that's a key component. So that's actually a part of our wraparound sports with hiring, peer support, and the voices of how we build these projects. It's key. So absolutely, we have several meetings. The CAA meeting, as I mentioned too, is also lived experience voices that are coming to those tables every single week to make sure that we're paying attention and closing gaps.
And for the DI, we're doing the same thing. We're starting to, and I'll be honest with you, we're starting to have lived experience, or people with lived experience, have more input. It's not been something that's happened at the DI in the past. In 2018, when we made this big change, is when we started to do more of that. And I can tell you right now, we blew up the old barring system because it was so horrible. But really trying to be more engaged and get the input that's needed. My newest term that I'm using all the time is I'm no longer building programs and finding people. I'm finding the people and building the programs.
I think we might borrow that too. Thank you.
I probably stole it, so.
Well, that's what we do. We steal and share. Yeah. Alex.
Yeah, just one question. I heard a lot about the cleanup, which is great, but it seems like you guys or your organizations were doing the cleanup. Had you ever talked to, or did the shelter encampment residents offer to help provide some of this cleanup or some of the services? Or did you ever even think about maybe helping them to form like an encampment service provide support committee or whatever that they could run on their own and help out with some of this?
The individuals that were in the encampment that day, it was their support of the others and the cleanup was all day long. This encampment in particular, we couldn't continue to let it go. It couldn't continue to be, we couldn't form a committee to help them support. The way that the gang was infiltrated into this encampment, when we did the cleanup, we were hearing stories like, thank you, I wasn't allowed to come into the DI. Oh, I'm glad that the organization is gone because I was being forced to deal. So we couldn't continue it because of how unsafe it was. Would I have? Yeah, I think if it was in a different area and some of the work that you guys do, having that input is incredibly important. And we would, at the DI when it was out front there, our teams would take out, if someone came and wanted brooms and extra garbage cans and that type of thing, we were bringing that out as well. And anyone that knows Calgary and knows Dermot Baldwin Way, there doesn't have to be an encampment out there, and there's someone out there cleaning up the street and sweeping it up, because it is where they are at that moment. I don't know if you guys have anything.
Yeah, I think in terms of encampments, I think that our engagement with folks is making sure that we're setting them up from the beginning. So those life skills on how do we tidy up around here. Negative attention creates displacement. We're aware of that. So that's something that we talk about frequently. it literally starts with that conversation, and I've seen camps with, 40, 50 tents. The city came in with a bulldozer, like, whew. Sometimes we miss it. Sometimes we're coming in late, but we do have those conversations from the beginning. How do we keep you in one space? Let's start building on those life skills. That's a great idea on a committee. I think that's fantastic. I might write that down and take that back, but I think that's fabulous. I love the idea, but we're starting with one person at a time. Did I miss anything that you guys want to add on that?
I'll just say. Yeah, so for my team, when I'm paired up with a peace officer and we're going into a camp, that education piece is definitely there. It's saying, hey, like you got a lot of scattered debris, maybe let's kind of tidy that up. If you keep it more contained in your tent, then you're less likely to get calls placed for your location, and then we don't have to be here with city crews to clean you up. So there is that conversation is there. What that looks like for the city is typically keep it small, keep it clean, keep it hidden. But we do recognize, and the city recognizes, that a lot of people don't want to be hidden for safety reasons. But that piece of connecting in that way is definitely there. And our city is really great in supporting community members with private property or business owners, and that they have, if their property is affected of any way from an encampment, they have what's called CoFlex, and it's a funding supported for the business owner in a one-time cleanup of whatever debris is left over.
Yeah, like, the thing about the cleanup was just, I realized, but what I was trying to kind of get at was the encampments themselves are kind of like a community, and they're trying to support themselves. So why don't we give them that extra support where they can support themselves around safety issues before the gangs get in? Or, in other ways, like handing out harm reduction kits or naloxone kits, or whatever. Is there, like, build those, they've already kind of built that community. Let's give them the extra supports, or give them the training that they need to kind of keep that going and help each other, towards their housing or their other needs.
I would definitely say a lot of it, it's person to person, and each situation, like there might be, other kind of different situations for different folks in different parts of the community and different parts of the city, and that's usually brought to our attention through that individual. So they're usually aware before we are, and it's definitely just more of like an education piece. So it's brought to our attention, we have that conversation, and then we safety plan with the individual, and that can look like many different things depending on what kind of problem that is occurring for them.
And I think that, we're all incredibly busy. I know from the DI's perspective, we're not outreach people, right? And it's finding the appropriate outreach teams like the encampment team that has all of those pieces in place to start to do that work and be funded to do that more intense work, right? We're all just don't have enough bodies right now.
That's certainly a problem that many regions have right now, so capacity is a big issue. Okay, so I think we're kind of near the end. Are you guys okay to stick around and answer some questions? Okay, so I'm just gonna read one last question from a person online, and again, if people wanna come up after and talk to the group, then by all means. Sorry, let me put my glasses on. What's your operating capacity for shelter beds in Calgary? And do you have overflow options in case there are no shelter beds available for people in encampments wanting to come inside?
I don't know our total number in Calgary. Jeff, do you happen to know it? No, but I can tell you right now, like in Calgary, there's room. We have capacity for just over 1,000 people. We were at 564 last night. So.
Okay. I just want to thank our presenters, Alpha House and Calgary Drop-In, and thank you for your great presentations, very informative. Kudos to coming together in the spirit and power of collaboration, which is really the key in all of this. So, and I'd like to thank you all for coming. As I mentioned, these people are here, so if you have any further questions, feel free to come up and enjoy the rest of your day and conference. Thanks.